Hello, and thank you for your interest in the Town of Sahuarita General Plan Update effort. This is Community Workshop number 1. I'm Matt Klysico with Michael Baker International, and we are a planning and engineering firm that was hired by the town to assist with this General Plan Update effort. As you can see on the slide here, our consultant team is made up of several members from Michael Baker, as well as the Gordley Group, a communications and outreach firm. And together we're excited to assist the town in this very important community-wide effort. As you can imagine, town staff is leading this effort overall and coordinates the project on a day-to-day basis. Our point of contact with the town for this project is Orlanthea Henderson. She is the planning and zoning manager for the town, and you can see on the slide there that there are other members of town staff that are routinely assisting in this project. So to kick off this community workshop effort, I first wanted to begin by asking a simple question. What is a general plan? Many of you might be familiar or have reviewed the town's existing general plan, but we thought that it would be helpful and beneficial to go through a couple finer points about this process overall, why we're undertaking it, and what it entails. So first off, if we look at what a general plan is, it's a state-mandated plan that is ultimately ratified by the voters. And so that's why this is such a special effort, is that while it is a community-driven process in terms of developing this general plan, ultimately the plan is brought to the voters for final ratification. So it truly is a plan that is created by residents and ultimately approved by residents. This is also a planning effort that is mandated by the state. And once a town creates their general plan, the state specifies that you must update that general plan every 10 years. And so the town last updated and ratified the general plan in 2015. And so here we are in preparation to go through the process again to reevaluate the general plan and bring it back to the voters for ratification. But beyond just being a state-mandated effort, it's good practice to look at our long-range planning documents and see if there's any adjustments that we need to make or areas that we may need to revise based on current conditions or future expectations. But overall, the general plan, as I mentioned, is a document that looks at the long-term view of the community. So it is that 30,000-foot document. It's looking at broad goals and policies to help ensure that we're not just making day-to-day decisions, but that the decisions we make from a day-to-day standpoint are guiding us to achieve our ultimate vision for the community. So it really establishes a roadmap to guide growth and development and ensure that it's in alignment with the quality of life that residents within the town expect. And then, as I mentioned, it includes a series of goals and policies to help convey what that vision is. From there, we then are able to utilize the general plan and have more confidence that in our daily efforts as the town council and staff, along with other committees and groups, make decisions that benefit the town, that it's done in a manner that is in alignment not only with where the town needs are today, but where the town would like to be 10, 20 years down the line. So that is a general synopsis of what a general plan is and why it's important within the community. But in terms of what does the general plan include, you can see on the right-hand side of this slide, state statute based on the size of a community determines what primary topics or elements must be included in every community's general plan. So you can see the required elements or topics that we must address in this general plan update include land use, growth areas, transportation, open space, environmental planning, water resources, and cost of development. Now, those are all baseline areas that you may look at that list and say, that looks generally comprehensive and touches on many of the primary topics that I'd be interested in my community, particularly land use and transportation and open space, where, of course, water is important within our state. So all of those topics, I think you would agree, are value added and important. But that does not mean that the town is limited to just addressing those topics. So every community is unique and can include other topics that they feel are important and relevant to their community. In the case of the town, the current general plan is a plan that covers other elective topics. And that's great to see that the town has already recognized in prior general plan efforts that there's other topics that are of importance. And that includes economic development, energy, and public services and facilities. So as part of this update effort, you can imagine some of the things that we'll look at is, are there any other elective elements or topics that we think we should also add into this general plan? Sometimes communities might look at art and culture to incorporate the visual art components that you might see across the community. They like to include culture to capture the history of the community. Some communities like to focus on complementary topics like education. So there's a lot of other things that we'll explore through this process to see if we are benefited by including that in this general plan update effort. Now, while we've talked a little bit about what the general plan is, I want to talk about the process. And so within this effort, we really look at it as kind of a four-phased approach. Our first phase is our recognize phase. And so you can see within this graphic that the recognize phase is kind of what you would imagine by its title. It's our existing conditions analysis, right? This is where we start to look at background data, whether that be census information or local, regional, or town data, so that we understand what has occurred from an information standpoint since the last general plan was prepared. All of this also allows us the ability to outline our community outreach approach, because as you can imagine, for a plan that is ultimately ratified by the voters, outreach and engagement with residents is a priority. It's almost a mandatory focus area in order for this to be a successful effort. So once we get through that recognize phase where we're able to look at existing conditions and create a roadmap for how we're going to engage with the community, we can then transition into our next phase, which is our enrich phase. And our enrich phase is in essence where we start to work with the community, where we have community meetings, where we start to present surveys to the community to get feedback at a larger scale, and then digest that input from the community so that we can start making recommendations about areas of the general plan we might want to revise or update. Then we take those revisions back to the community to evaluate how and why we made certain recommendations. And that will give residents the benefit to understand what input has been provided, as well as how that information was digested and incorporated into the draft of the general plan. And so after we go through all of that, we'll have a series of community workshops, and I'll touch on that in a little more detail in a couple slides. So throughout this enrich process, we'll have a series of touch points with residents where you'll be informed and we'll seek your input to validate suggestions and recommendations. We'll also have work sessions with the Planning Commission and the Town Council to keep them informed of how the process is moving along. And once we get through all of that, we'll have, as we draft components of the plan, we'll ultimately get a complete draft of the plan, right? We'll take it down in different chapters and chunks. And once we do that, we will then go into the state-mandated 60-day review draft. that is a period of 2 months where the state law mandates we must present the plan to adjacent communities as well as the public to ensure that everyone understands what is being proposed within the update effort before we move into some of the formal adoption process. So I think it's a great um, pause within the process to give ourselves a solid 2 months to take stock of everything that has been included in this update effort, and then to get feedback on that to see if there's any final adjustments we need to make before we move into that achieve phase. The achieve phase is the final step in terms of making any edits that we received or based on comments out of the 60-day review. And then once we make those changes, we go through the formal adoption process, which involves meetings with the Planning and Zoning Commission, and then ultimately bringing the plan to the town council for approval. Once the town council approves the plan, then that authorizes the plan to be placed on the ballot for ultimate voter ratification. And so we must obtain over 50% approval of the plan in order for it to become effective. Now, one of the things you'll see is we have 3 of the primary phases, but the 4th phase is really that engagement aspect. And you see how that's intertwined on this overall graphic. And so while the recognize, enrich, and achieve phases are clear and important, the engagement is continuous throughout the process. And we'll touch on what that engagement entails in just a few slides here. But I think you'll see the timeline overall is at the top of the page. And because this is a very comprehensive document, this is a long timeline. You see, we started at the beginning of the year here in January of 2024, and we project to be placing this effort on the May 2026 ballot for voter ratification. So you may look at that timeline and think, wow, that's a long overall project focus. And part of the reason for that is actually not because of the overall work effort, but because of state law. And part of the ratification process of taking this to the voters in May of 2026 is that state law says we must have the plan completed 180 days prior to that May election. So when we look at that 180 days that we won't be working on the plan, we have to have council approve the plan 180 days before then that election. That's a time where there will be obviously no work on the plan. Plus we have the 2-month period of the 60-day review where we put the plan out for the public to review. So when you look at this timeline, please keep in mind that there's many months throughout the process that often are part of the state mandated requirements and is built in to provide proper timing to ensure that the public gets to review the document and that the county has the ability to get it on the ballot for ultimate public review and approval. So that's why we have the long lead time, but it also gives us great opportunity within that process to get out to all different aspects of the community, whether that's our youth or our seniors, or all of our other residents within the town, to ensure that we're hearing good feedback and addressing the areas that are most important to residents. So hopefully that gives you a quick gauge of the overall intent and need behind the general plan, what the process entails, but you might still be a little unclear of where within the development effort does the general plan fall and ultimately how does it inform. And so we like to utilize this simple inverted pyramid to quickly convey how the general plan works with or is incorporated into some of the other documents that the town utilizes to guide growth and development. So you can see here that the general plan is at the top, the broadest plan, right? It is the most general by name plan that the town utilizes. And therefore, given that it's a general plan, it's the most broad plan. It covers many topics in order to have that complete vision. Once we have the general plan set, that then informs the development of specific area plans. So just as that title says, sometimes within communities, there's areas that have unique aspects or need special attention, and therefore they are specific areas that get more detail than what is covered in the broader general plan. So throughout the general plan process, if we start to hear input on specific areas of the town that are very nuanced in terms of what residents are wanting or looking to see in those areas, they might lend themselves more to being topics addressed at the specific area plan level if they're very focused. But if it's a more broader overall goal or policy, then that very much is more applicable to the general plan. Now, once we get through developing the general plan and that informs any specific area plans that may need to be prepared or revised, we then have our zoning code, and residents are often very familiar with the zoning code because that is the document that actually defines how development can occur on a specific property. So the general plan might look at a large area and say this area is appropriate for residential, but doesn't get into the specifics per se about what exactly is the type of residential that is allowed on a particular property. It's looking more broadly at this is where residential goes, this is where commercial goes, this is where industrial goes. That's in the general plan. When we get to the zoning or the zoning map, then in those residential areas or commercial areas or industrial areas, we start to refine things and say this is where single family development goes, this is where multifamily development goes, this is the density that's allowed there, this is the height of buildings, this is the setbacks, these are the specific uses that are allowed, this is how much parking is required, this is how much open space is needed. All of those very rigid, if you will, details are defined in the zoning ordinance. So that's another thing to just keep in mind, that as we gain feedback, sometimes if we hear some very detailed comments, we might make the observation that that's a great point of reference. However, that's going to be best addressed in the zoning code rather than the general plan. So it's not that we don't want to address any feedback, but sometimes we may need to guide where that feedback is most applicable and or beneficial. So please keep in mind we'll be looking at that as we gain feedback from residents about if that is a general plan topic or something that might be better addressed in a specific area plan or a zoning ordinance. Once you define how you can develop your property through the zoning code, you then can either develop a site plan or a plat that will define specifically what your project looks like. So then that is the actual plan of your property and shows either where the buildings will go and where the parking will be. If it's a non-residential project or if it's a residential project, it will show how the streets are laid out and where the lots go and where the parks are. That's all occurs at that site plan or platting. And then you get into construction. And that's, the fine point to your development and going vertical on your property. So you can kind of see how it all starts to funnel down into pinpointed development. So we're excited to assist the town on this general plan to set that foundation that then trickles down and informs all the other aspects that help guide growth and development in the community. Now, here is where I want to spend some time talking about the community outreach aspect because that is important. This slide simply captures the outreach efforts that we're going to be incorporating throughout this process. And so we'll continue to inform residents as we move along in terms of where we are and what opportunities are available for residents to stay engaged. But this slide is just intended to give you an overall viewpoint of how we'll be approaching outreach. And then as events come up, we'll be broadcasting through town channels, specific meeting dates or locations, or methods that you can continue to be informed and engaged. So as I mentioned, over the life of this project, we're looking to have 3 community workshops. Those workshops will be conducted both in person as well as virtual. So our goal is to allow residents to participate in a way that is most convenient and comfortable to you. So if you like to participate in person, we want to give you that opportunity, but we understand everyone is busy. Sometimes they can't get away from your family commitments, especially during weeknights or in the evenings. And so that virtual component, as you're watching this video, is equally beneficial and important, and we want to make sure we offer those opportunities. So our first community workshop, which we're going over now, is our kickoff effort to introduce the project, and then also where we'll be validating our goal, our vision and goals. And then we'll walk through what that looks like in a couple slides here. But once we go through this first round of outreach, we'll then transition into our second community workshop that will most likely happen in late fall or early winter. And that will be where we can share the feedback we've collected from residents through this first round of outreach and explain how we utilize that input to inform any revisions to the plan itself. So as you can see, we look at Community Workshop 1 as identifying and validating where the town is today, and confirm where we want to be 10 or 20 years from now. Then in the second community workshop, we'll share that input and outline how we incorporated that input into recommendations for the revision of the plan. And then at the third community workshop, we'll show, okay, we collected the final feedback in the second workshop on our recommendations. We made any necessary revisions, and here is the complete plan for you to look at before we put it out for that 60-day review period that I discussed. So hopefully you see how that's a very iterative process where it's a lot of back and forth. We present information to the public, we ask for your input, we make adjustments based on your input, then we go back to you, validate things, and then ultimately after we go through that at different milestones, we will go into the formal adoption process. But beyond just those community workshops, there's many other avenues that we're going to use to allow you to be engaged and hopefully do it in a manner that is convenient for you. So one of those will be having mobile studios. So rather than just having a workshop and asking you to come to us or to go to a website, we'll have mobile studios at special town events. We just kicked off the project at the Stars and Stripes event. Our next workshop mobile studio that we're planning is Winterfest, and we'll continue to identify other events that the town hosts to hopefully connect with some of you that may enjoy attending those events. And so we can piggyback your attendance by engaging you at those events, I should say, instead of asking you to come to a specialized workshop. We recognize, though, that the community is not just comprised of our adults and our senior population, but we also have youth. And one of the efforts we enjoy doing is conducting youth workshops. And I think we'll be pleasantly surprised at some of the thoughtful ideas that our youth speaks about when we ask them their thoughts and views on their community. because ultimately we recognize that our youth is the future of the town. And so while they may go away for an education or for other life milestones, but we always want our youth to view Sahuarita as home and to make this their long-term home. And so hearing from them about what they like to see in a town is very important as well. And then all of this is supported by our digital engagement applications. So it's our project website that you can see there, sahuaritagp.com. It's preparing and pushing out community surveys so that we can hear from residents. It's using the town's social media channels to push out information about status of the project and any upcoming meetings, and then using email blasts to inform whether it's Facebook groups, HOAs, special other stakeholders across the community. So all of that are aspects that we'll be utilizing to continuously inform and hear from residents throughout this update effort. So here's some images from our Stars and Stripes outreach, where we just use this as an opportunity to guide residents to the project website and simply inform residents about what the effort entails and how they can participate. So with that, I wanted to close with some direction on how we can collect your information as part of this virtual workshop. So given that you're watching this video now, that means that you've visited the website and have clicked on the community workshop number 1, where this video is presented. And within this virtual workshop, we have, in essence, 2 primary ways that you can participate and provide your input that is in alignment with our in-person workshop and the exercises we asked residents in person to help go through. And so virtually online, those efforts are broken out into 2 parts, part 1 and part 2. The part 1 survey is focused on looking at the existing vision statement in the current general plan and asking residents to review that and see if you would make any recommendations on how that should be revised. We like to look at the vision statement because ultimately that is the forward-looking viewpoint that the general plan and all of its goals and policies will work to help carry out. So that vision statement sets the tone and everything else rolls up underneath that vision statement. So it's important that we look at that vision and validate it and say, yes, we think that it still holds true today as it did 10 years ago, or no, it's a good solid vision, but here's a few other things that I would like or think should be part of that vision. Then we also, as part of the Part 1 survey, ask residents to help validate some prior results of other town surveys. So back in 2022, the town conducted a community-wide survey and asked questions to residents. The results of that survey are very helpful and informative, but it's been a couple years now since that survey was conducted. So we have a couple of results from that survey to remind residents about how residents, or to remind you about how residents felt back in 2022 about certain topics or questions within the community. So we're sharing those results in the survey, and then we ask you, do you still feel the same way? Do you agree with the results as they were shared back in 2022? Or would you refine those results and give you an opportunity to share how you might answer that differently in 2024? So that's part of the Part 1 survey effort. The other part is optional. So as you go through Part 1 survey, at the end, it will say thank you and acknowledge that while we ask a lot of questions about your perception of the town, there's also the physical aspect of the town. Are there areas physically within the town that you think should be preserved or should be improved or should be focused on? Those areas are also helpful to recognize, and so we want to give residents the opportunity that if you have thoughts on physical locations within town that you think need more attention, that we have a mapping exercise where you can look at a map of the town and actually put pins on the map and identify your thoughts for areas within the town limits. So you can see on the slide there that it mentions this is optional, meaning that we don't require you to think of something from a geographic standpoint. However, if you absolutely have thoughts or something top of mind, we want to give residents that opportunity, just as we did in person, to point on a map and say, this is an area where I think we need to give some attention. And then once you complete part one, that looks at, again, the existing vision statement in the general plan, helps validate some survey results that are informative to this general plan process from the 2022 town survey. Then we get into part two, where we ask you to look at the existing goals in the current general plan and help validate those goals. Review them and tell us if you think this goal is clear, if this goal is still applicable, if this goal should be, the importance of the goal should be enhanced. So we ask you to identify whether the goal is very important, unimportant, or you don't know. And all of those are helpful and beneficial questions. So within this effort, we want to inform you, but it's equally important to hear from you, to get your input so that then we can make adjustments to the general plan in your eyes. And so the participation in these two surveys, part one and part two, is very helpful. And so the next slide here just gives a little visual of how you can actually take that survey. So here's a snapshot, a screenshot of the project webpage. And so if you came to this video, you would have clicked on Community Workshop number 1, and then you would have seen in the blue button that's circled in red where you can click on the survey, and then you'll see part 1 survey and part 2 survey. And you can click on both of those if you would like to take each of them, and then prompts in the survey will help guide you through that effort. So we greatly appreciate your participation as we move forward in this process. A few things to keep in mind is that once the survey is now open, we'll keep this survey open for a month to ensure that we give residents a clear opportunity to share your input. And then at the close of that survey, we'll distill the information, analyze it, and then present it to the community so that you see everything that we see in terms of what residents shared. And then we'll use that to make revisions to the vision statement and the goals in the current general plan to help show that trail of breadcrumbs of the feedback we got and how we use that feedback to then make adjustments to the plan so that we hopefully have that clear picture of what input came in and how that input was then translated into direct edits into the plan. And all of this outreach will continue, as I mentioned, into the fall and winter and through the life of this project. So to stay involved, we would encourage you to continue to look at the project website, sahuaritagp.com. On the website, you can sign up for updates. So if you would like to share your email address, we will, when we have announcements going out about the project, we will email you those announcements as well. If you have offline questions, you say this video was helpful, but I have a few points of clarification, you can send emails to salrita@salritaaz.gov, and those emails will be reviewed as they come in, and someone from the project team will review that and get back to you with a response. And then we continue to encourage you to join us as the project moves along for our future outreach efforts. So again, thank you for your interest. Thank you for your participation. And we look forward to working with you. Have a wonderful day.